Today we're going to pull back the curtain on something pretty fascinating. We're going to see how a massive city like Cape Town actually grades itself, using what is basically a citywide report card. So let's dive right in.
It seems like a simple question, but it's got a really complex answer. When a city administration promises safer streets, or faster service delivery, or better infrastructure, how do they, and maybe more importantly, how do we, know if they're actually delivering? It can't just be based on a gut feeling, right? There has to be a system, and it has to be based on hard data.
And the main tool they use is this thing called the Corporate Scorecard. Honestly, the best way to think about it is exactly like a school report card. It lists all the different subjects, like safety, sanitation, transport, and then it grades the city's performance against the goals it set for itself at the beginning of the year.
Now, this scorecard isn't just some document that exists in a vacuum. Nope, it's actually the most visible piece of a much larger framework, the Organizational Performance Management System, or OPM for short. So if the OPM system is the entire engine room, the scorecard is the main dashboard that tells you how everything's running.
So, how does this report card stay accurate and, relevant? It's not just a once-a-year thing. It all comes down to a really regular, rhythmic process, kind of like a quarterly health check that keeps the whole system honest and on track.
The whole thing works in a cycle, which is designed to make sure the city's goals aren't just set once and then forgotten about. You can see the 5 key stages right here, from the initial planning all the way through to auditing. But the real heartbeat of this process, the part that keeps it alive with fresh information, is that second step, monitoring.
That's right. Every single 3 months, the city has to rigorously monitor its own performance. And this is not just about ticking boxes. This quarterly process is the very engine that powers the scorecard. It provides all the critical data needed to see what's working, what isn't, and most importantly, why.
Okay, so that's the system. But how does this data actually get from a spreadsheet into your neighborhood? Well, this process isn't just about crunching numbers. It's about turning that data into real-world action that you can actually see and feel.
So this quarterly data is absolutely crucial for 3 main reasons. First, it helps the city pinpoint and fix problems as they come up. Second, it lets them adjust their targets so they actually match what's happening on the ground. And third, it helps them set realistic, achievable goals for brand new projects. And this is a perfect example of that in action. Let's talk about law enforcement roadblocks. After all the COVID-19 restrictions were lifted, the quarterly data showed that traffic patterns had completely changed. So what did the city do? They used that data to increase the target for roadblocks, making it a much more meaningful measure of performance in this new post-COVID world.
And this illustrates perfectly what happens when they have a brand new goal. When the city wanted to start tracking response times for water and sanitation issues, they didn't just pluck a target out of thin air. Instead, they used the data from the first, second, and third quarters to understand what was actually possible. Only then, with real data in hand, did they set a firm, long-term target. Smart, right?
Of course, a system that's important can't just be a good idea or a suggestion. It has to have teeth. It has to be backed by law. And that brings us to the legal framework that gives this whole process its authority and makes sure it's followed to the letter.
See, in the eyes of the law, that corporate scorecard has a much more formal, kind of clunky name, the Service Delivery and Budget Implementation Plan, or SDBIP. But the name itself tells you everything you need to know. It legally connects the city's budget to the actual services it promises to deliver. It's the law.
And if that quarterly data shows a target needs to change, they can't just get out a pen and scribble it out. Any change or amendment has to follow these formal steps laid out in national law, the Municipal Systems Act. And this isn't just bureaucratic red tape. This formal process makes sure that any changes are deliberate, they're justified, and they're transparent to the public. It stops anyone from changing the goalposts just because they feel like it.
And the system itself isn't set in stone. It actually evolves. For instance, after a review by the Auditor General, the city was mandated to add new things to track. So now, things like staff vacancy rates and how quickly they respond to complaints are officially on the scorecard, adding another layer of accountability.
All right, so data and laws are essential, but at the end of the day, you also need people. So who are the watchdogs? Who holds the city accountable and makes sure this entire system is actually working for the public?
Well, the oversight happens at multiple levels. First, you've got council portfolio committees, and their job is to keep a close eye on specific departments, like water or transport. Then there's the Municipal Public Accounts Committee, which takes a bigger picture look at the annual performance. And finally, right at the very top, The city's executive leadership, including the mayor, holds regular meetings to ensure accountability from the highest level down.
You know, this quote from one of the city's own documents really just sums it all up perfectly. The scorecard and the quarterly reviews, they aren't just for show. They are a diagnostic tool used to keep the city's big strategic plans grounded in reality and, crucially, responsive to the changing needs of its people.
So there you have it. Behind the scenes of City Hall, there's this really detailed system that's constantly grading your city's performance. Which brings me to one last question for you. Your city has a report card. Do you have any idea what grade it's getting?